True, that makes sense. I want to touch on another note that you brought up earlier. You were saying that I don't know verbatim what you said, but you mentioned something about politicians trying to reach out and gain the black vote. So that brings us into our next topic of discussion, Candace Owens
Oh
and
yeah.
her effort to conduct outreach to the black community and maybe recruit more black conservatives. What are your thoughts on Candace Owens? Do you see her as a black liberator or a white placater?
All right, got me smiling tonight. That's good. Candace Owens, I believe she's a sister, and when I mean sister, African American sister, she's just getting in where she fits in. See, we have to understand back in the mid 1800s, we had about maybe 6 or 7 Republican black congressmen back then. You
Was a
can look
matter
it
of
up.
fact the first
Right.
elected black official in the United States of America actually was a Republican. What were you saying?
No, so what I'm saying, Candace Owens, she just represents the other side of the coin. I don't have no real issues with her. I think sometimes she may make a comment or two that might sound like it sends African American people back, like a couple of hundred years, whatever the case may be, because of some of her views. But the reality is that you need both sides to represent. You need African American people to represent conservatism, the liberal, point of view, and it's very important. She may not be. See, the only thing is this: we have been, the majority of African American people have been pretty much finessed and persuaded that voting Democrat is the only way to vote and just stick with the Democratic Party. But when you look at some of the conditions in some of the African American, cities throughout the United States, like Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, just to name a few, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and the list goes on and on. We have a lot of despair and hopelessness in some of our African American urban areas, and
Where
we've
they
been voting
primarily vote
Democrat for a long
Democrats too,
time.
actually.
Yeah, we've been voting. What you say now?
I said, what you're saying is that, black people have been finessed to primarily vote Democratic, but if you look in their communities, they're distressed.
That's the point I'm
And so
making.
it's like,
That's the
why
visual.
is it that you're putting these people in office in these powerful positions, and they really haven't done anything to help you? Now, me personally, I agree with Candace Owens on that point. Democrats have definitely taken the black vote for granted, and they just feel that it's an easy win for them. And I think a lot of black people may not necessarily feel comfortable voting Republican, and I think that they just take the lesser of two evils, which in their eyes is the Democratic Party, for the simple fact that the Democrats, until recent years, I would say after LBJ, has just they've been a mouthpiece for the African American community in advancing, civil rights legislation. And so
Yes,
I
but
think
you
that
have to
they are a
understand.
voice for the people that don't have a voice. And one thing that I would like to see, not only from Candace Owens, but also other, black conservatives who have a face in the media, I think oftentimes they dismiss the plight that a lot of blacks in the country feel they go through. And when these instances of police brutality happen, instead of them trying to build bridges and try to develop a sense of understanding, or compassion, they're just automatically on the defense or on the offense. And they're
Yeah.
just attacking the people who feel one type of way. And I think that's very divisive and it's very dangerous.
Well, you also have to understand, during former President Roosevelt's administration, they came with what you call the New Deal. But African American people were left out of the New Deal. That's what caused African American people to start voting for the Democratic Party. You can look
Okay.
there's you can trace that history right there. So that's important to take notice of. So right now it's just problematic because, for example, you can have a Martian. I'm serious. You can have a Martian to fly to the United States on a flying saucer, and he jumps out his flying saucer with a three-piece suit on, with a duffel bag of money, and he'll say he's running as a Democrat for governor or president. And I guarantee you, our people will support that Martian because what happens is that, I'm just putting a visual out there. What happens is it's all about money in our community to a degree. A lot of individuals, they receive money or they take payoffs and everything to try to push that candidate to win that office. And once that candidate wins, only a few people are really looked out for. And this has been going on since the slave plantation, where you had some of the slave owners that attempted to have black pastors to do their bidding for them, to tell African people it was okay for them to be in slavery. It was actually ordained in the Bible for African people to be in slavery. So when slavery ended, The same model exists even today, where you have the popular African American so-called leader that would try to pacify the people to allow one of these rich people to secure office. It happens all the time, man. You can see it play out, and you got all these here stories. And I don't want to put nobody out there on Front Street, but you have a lot of stories. Matter of fact, I'll say this here, and I don't know if it's totally true or not, but Byron Allen was suing Comcast for a couple of $1 billion, right? And the word got out that Al Sharpton took $2 million from Comcast to not raise his voice up and support Byron Allen's lawsuit. But $2 million did go to the Action Network, but the way Al Sharpton broke it down was the money was for some other stuff. But we seen Al Sharpton doing a Soul Train line dance. After that, he was dancing his behind off of in New York City. And I would have been dancing too if I came across $2 million, right?
Right, that makes sense. So there's a lot of backroom dealing going on that influences the front of the scenes,
Yes.
when dealing with politics.
That's what I'm telling you. So Candace Owens, she's not too far off the charts. She's entitled to her own views. But when you have African American people in particular in positions of influence, she has a pretty massive following. So what happens is that a lot of people begin to look at what she's saying, and we forget all the struggles that we had to overcome to get where we are today. So we cannot, like, for example, you have some people that say that African American people do not deserve reparations. I've heard the Lieutenant Governor over in Winsome, over there in Virginia, she made a comment that slavery did exist. There's some vestiges of slavery that still, that we need to think about, but it's over now. How many times we're going to keep going back there? And she's of Jamaican descent. And my thing, why would she even say that? Because, basically we definitely deserve reparations, but people, I don't even know where Candace Owens, fits in with the reparations argument, but it's something to, consider. And some people step on reparations like we asking for a handout or something. We need to challenge Biden. We need to challenge all these billionaires that have won these the governor's office throughout the United States, and see where they stand on reparations as well.
The main point that I'm trying to think, I feel like a lot of Black conservatives feel as if they have to be dismissive of the racism that has occurred throughout our country's history. And I think that they're mainly preaching that the Black community needs to take more agency and be more independent and actually go out there and do more for themselves. And I agree with that. However, I still think that there's a lot of systematic injustice that does occur. And even though, some of us might be the exception, we're definitely not the rule. And I think that, sometimes people speak from a place of privilege and they're not realizing. And I think in my opinion, I would like to see them find a way to, bridge that gap and not necessarily give up, not become complacent in a lot of the conservative rhetoric at the expense of some of the hardships that some Black people or most Black people may face in this country, or may face on a daily basis.
Well, that was my point when I talked about Candace Owens and some of the Black conservatives. They tried to dismiss all the struggles that African American people had to endure. We come from a very resilient background, because in order to, deal with the barbaric transatlantic slave trade, the Jim Crow laws, then you get into discrimination and all that kind of stuff, the civil rights era, the Black Power era, and even the crack cocaine era and everything else, the prison industrial complex. It's an honor for us to still be here today with an open mind, and so we can pretty much do our best. See, this is the thing, as far as my point of view anyway. If African American people were unified like we should, we would actually own and operate everything in our communities, everything. Even the politicians, they couldn't even get no traction if we were unified as like one body of people. But because of the payoffs, the backdoor dealing and stuff, a lot of us end up getting left out of the equation. And don't get me wrong, I know we're not going to be able to help everybody in our community.
Body of people. Do you think any group is unified, or?
Yes, I do. I believe the Latino community is unified. Yes, I do. Okay. Because here in Chicago, Latino people vote for their own candidates. They vote for Latino candidates. If they have somebody running, they do. 78 to 80% of them vote for one of their own candidates. Is there an
instance in which they have two Latino candidates running, or is it normally just one?
It's normally just one.
Okay.
And they vote for that person. That's just the way it goes. And I think it's cool.
They basically stand behind their own despite their beliefs. You think if there was you won't get a Republican Latino candidate running in Chicago. You won't get any Republicans running in Chicago, quite frankly. But I guess on a national scale, if it came down to, a Latino, maybe let's say it was Latino president,
Okay.
two candidates, and you had two Latino candidates. One was Republican, one was Democrat. I mean, well, obviously, though, that's going to be a split between conservative and liberals for Latino. I guess I'm trying to understand, like, okay, so if there were, let's just theoretically be theoretical here and say that there were a Latino president running. There was one Latino president candidate, and the other candidates were, are from the different ethnic groups, Black, white, Asian, whatever. Do you think that the Latino people would set aside their beliefs and vote for the Latino person just because they were Latino? Or do you think that they would put their beliefs above their ethnic group and
I
vote for
truly believe
somebody who they thought mirrored their belief system? Or do you think their primary purpose is, you know what, let's get behind this Latino candidate and push him, regardless
I
of his
believe
beliefs?
if there was one Latino candidate running for president, I believe the Latino community would come out and support that Latino candidate in record numbers. I truly
Okay.
believe that. There's a lightweight model in Chicago. He's a United States congressman now. His name is Chuy Garcia, Latino brother, Mexican American individual. He ran for mayor, and about 80% of the Mexican community voted for him.
Okay.
A lot of times, there was situations where you didn't have no Latinos in the race. Of course, they voted for other, ethnic groups, somebody white or maybe somebody black to a small degree. But 80% of Latinos voted for Chuy Garcia.
Well,
That
couldn't
goes
we
to show
argue
you.
that the same thing happened when Barack Obama ran? Do you think that, blacks, congregated towards him in record numbers, in mass?
Yeah, so that was a difference there. Barack Obama was what you call a once in a lifetime phenomenon. I'll say it like that because I truly believe, yeah, African American, and not just African American people, the entire country pretty much rallied around Barack Obama because of him being I'm a light-skinned brother myself, but I come off, I lived a couple of different lives. Like Barack Obama was squeaky clean, light-skinned brother, well-mannered, married man, carried himself very professional, and I believe in those, everybody voted for Barack Obama. It was just his time. And like I said, probably a once in a lifetime type of situation because I don't see another African American being able to hold that presidential seat. I hope we can find somebody, but Barack might have just been, it was his time. Just put it like that.
True, 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 true.